Hi there. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Stripe Connect with Node.js. Now, I have a video on doing this with PHP, so I'll include that down in the description below. But we're going to start off by saying, so if you look at my screen right now, these are the tabs I have open. I'll put them all in the description below. This may be a longer video. So I have the Stripe docs here, using Connect with a custom account. This is what we're going to do. They used to be called managed accounts. A custom account is the idea that let's say you're Shopify, just hypothetically. You're Shopify and you have a bunch of store owners and you don't actually want to you want to charge their customers, and then you want to take an application fee, and then you want the money to go to the store owners because they're just using your platform. Well, a custom account allows you to do this. Stripe Connect is the actual tool that allows you to do this. And so the way it works is you set up all their banking information, and if you want, you can just have them set up a Stripe account. But if you want to use a custom account, you essentially have you collect all the information from them on your end, on your UI. You save the information on Stripe, which is more secure, most likely than your own solution, and then you essentially have them fill in all the information. You save it to their Stripe custom account, which is essentially a Stripe account run through your account. And then whenever they go to make a charge to one of their customers, you could set it up so it takes an application fee. So it's free. I don't know. Like, you can set up a subscription for their so that they're charging the customer, and then you're getting a fee. Now, this video may be a little bit longer. I did this in the last one. It was like a 40-minute video. I don't know how long it's actually going to be. That's some of the videos I actually like to do before I actually record the video. But when it's like 40 minutes, it's a little difficult to do because it's a lot of time. So I'm going to put on the screen right now all the steps that I'm going to follow. And with these steps, I'm going to actually follow them. I'm going to cut between each scene. In the first comment, in the comment section, will be a pinned comment from me, and I'll give you the exact time on which time each aspect happened. And the reason for that is, it's so if you're watching this video to just see how to do one aspect of it, you can just skip ahead. I'm not going to force you to watch the whole thing, but if you are interested in doing the whole thing, I'm going to go ahead from start to finish. And the very last step is making a charge with your new Stripe account. This I'm also going to do this all with hard coding. So I'm going to create a Stripe account. I'm going to get the ID back, and I'm just going to hold on to it. You'll actually have to set up the whole user structure. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video. It's not the point of the video. So let's get started. So back to what I have open here. So I have I got distracted. I'm using Connect with a custom account. I have requiring verification information. So as you can see, based on the country that your customer is in. So let's say I'm in these are supported countries. Let's say I'm in Canada. They have to give me an external account, which is a special case actually. They have to give me an address. They have to give me a date of birth, a first name, a last name, a personal ID, so that's your social insurance number, a type of account, so is it business or is it individual, the terms of conditions, terms of service acceptance, and then additional requirements would be a legal verification document, so like a license plate. So we'll have to, so the special cases in this, based on these requirements, are the external account. You'll have to do the generate a Stripe token. Just like charging a credit card, you have to generate the token on the front end, and then on the back end you use a token to charge with Stripe. I'll do it. I'll show you. Address is a little hard because you can only submit the address. It's not hard, but someone types out their address all at once, even though these are all individual things. Date of birth is another weird case. First name, last name are pretty simple. Personal ID number. That's a social insurance number. That will be a little bit difficult because you'll have to do custom information providing. So like in Canada, it's called a social insurance number. In another country, maybe it might be called something else. Type, I'll get into that. Terms of service acceptance is actually relatively easy. You do that when they begin the process. You just say, by clicking begin setup, you agree to our terms and services and Stripe terms and services, and you have to link it. And the last special case is the verification document. That's actually involving file upload, so it's a little bit harder. But with all this, the important thing is to do this in a dynamic way, because I found that originally the first time I was learning how to do this, I did it in a very, like, here's this case and here's this case. There's so many cases, so many countries, so many different currencies, And like I hate to say it, but if you're not going to do it with all the countries and all, you might as well just you should do it dynamically, so you can, even if it's supporting one country and it's only an individual account, you should be able to do it dynamically. So that's what I have to say. So as you can see, company or individual are the two types. This link here, this is testing with a Stripe account, so they give you test IDs. So I'm going to do a lot of things for just Canada. So like, here's the account number, here's the routing number. Stripe provides you with errors that we'll add in so that people can see what errors are being thrown, and you don't actually have to ever handle errors. Stripe will throw you an error that makes sense. I'm going to use this Stack Overflow post, how to get nested object with the string from dot notation. So the idea is, I want essentially, here's my dot notation, and then I will set the value. Well, someone wrote a nice little function for that, which is amazing, because what we're going to do is, with this, we're going to use the dot notation, and we're going to set the value. And so we don't actually have, because essentially there's a function call that you can use with Stripe. You say, okay, what am I missing? What fields do I need? And we'll return a string with that entire thing. And so what we'll do is we'll pass that to the front end, and then the front end will just pass that back to the back end, saying like, here's the element in this as a string, even though you need it's the child of the child of the child of an object. And so that's what this link here will do. This is a Medium post I wrote about uploading to an S3 bucket. The important aspect of it is the file upload aspect. That's all we're going to be taking from this Medium post. I'm not trying to make this video about S3 or anything like that. This is another thing. I took this right off the Stripe websites. I'm going to be using React to the front end. You'll have the opportunity to just skip that part, and 100% if you're not using React, feel free to. I've done it in just pure HTML when I was doing with PHP, but this is what they recommend using for React front end. This tab is NEER Boilerplate. It's just a React boilerplate code with a Node backend. I know it works, so I'm going to use it as my starting point. I just know the code works, and I just need you have React and Node all set up, so I'm going to show you how to do that. And the last one, there's I guess two more here. This is the Stripe full documentation API. If you scroll down on the left side here, you see subscriptions, you see connect, and this is an example of creating an account. And so it's relatively simple. You just say the account type, the country, and then some sort of information like email. What we're going to do is we're going to retrieve the account. This here, fields needed. It's under verification. It's pretty nested, but that's going to have a list of elements that we need. So it may say like the legal entity .address.line 1, for example. This is going to be the important aspect. And the last tab is Stripe.js and elements, and that is what I was saying with the React element. This is for the front end. I've actually never used React elements. I'm going to use it. I'm going to get it set up, and then I'm going to flip on the camera and explain it, just so you're not watching me try to figure it out. I don't think it's going to be that hard to figure out, but we'll get started now. First thing you're going to do is, as you can see, I have the NEER boilerplate code open. It's in the description if you want the link. All you got to do is hit clone, and I have about 1,000 tabs open. I'm going to do a CD onto my desktop. I have a NEER boilerplate already, so I'm just going to delete it. So this is a terminal window, by the way. I'm not sure if I have to mention that. And I'm going to hit clear, and then I'm going to do a git clone and then paste the link. And then I'm going to CD into that, so I'm in that folder, and I'm going to run, hopefully this is big enough. And then I'm going to run npm install here, which is going to begin the installation process. I'm going to now cut the video so that you don't watch the whole installation. Feel free to pause the video. Okay, so my installation is nearly done. I'm going to open up the project here. I'm just going to do a file open. I'm using Atom as my editor here. A lot of layers there. I'm going to scroll down to my NEER boilerplate, and I have it open. But one thing to actually use this code is you have to change this to say be a config.js. As you can see, it gets git ignored. It expects to give you an easy API key and a easy app ID. So we're not actually using easy API in this video, so I'm just going to take those both out, and we're going to change to say Stripe secret key and Stripe public key. Or they call it publishable key, but we'll call it public key. And that should be good there. Except this is also set up so it's just a basic demo or whatever it is. We're going to change this all, so we're not going to use easy API. So take that out. And then we're going to take out the entire GET request. We'll just use post just so it's not overly complicated. And we'll take out all of this. So now we have an empty file here, practically. We'll rename it to call it stripe.js just so it's, I guess it's a little confusing because there's actually a stripe.js. Okay, we'll call it payment.js. Okay, so that's all set up. We'll say Stripe account. Let's say get or something like that. You know, like. And this, what we're going to do here is we're just going to retrieve missing. This is going to be the fields needed. So. And we're going to hard code the Stripe account ID in here. So the idea is it's going to initially, you're supposed to get it from a database, but I'm not going to show you how to do that. So it's called Stripe account ID, and it's going to be empty for now. And our first line of code will be if Stripe account ID is null, res.send.success false. Or sorry, the call's successful. And then we want to say is and the alternative will be, the setup has begun. So we're just gonna save that. So you're gonna find your Stripe ID key. I'm looking at my dashboard here. They'll change. If you go down to API, I'm in view testing data. So I'm gonna copy my secret key and my publishable key into those two spots. I should mention that I'm signed into my account. I'm on an account. I've set up things. I'm set to view testing, and I hit API. That's where I am. And I just copied and pasted them. Let me just check the terminal. Okay, so that's set up. Now we're just going to do an npm run start dev, which is going to kick off our boilerplate code onto port 8080. Never mind, it's going to kick it onto port 2018. It's actually not set up quite yet. You'll see it has to do this whole Webpack compile. And now it is. So this is the starting point. We're going to change this, but we know our code is running. We're running React on the front end, and we're running Node on the back end. Okay, welcome to this step of the video. We're going to begin the actual setup of the Stripe account, and so that involves what we previously had, which was under our payment.js. We have our Stripe account, which is hard-coded for me. I recommend putting in a database for you. So the idea is you retrieve this from the database for the specific users that's logged in. This variable will have a Stripe account. If it doesn't, it's going to return setup began false. Otherwise, it's going to return true. I mean, in this case, I'm going to actually make this null. We know in this case it will actually return false because, I mean, it's not set. We can see that. So we'll head over to our React side of things, where we'll set up just the front end quickly. So if you go to components, and then I think it's on home, is where the code's been written. Hello world we will not need. And so with that, what's the wording I use here? Setup began. So we'll do this. Setup began is false by default. Setup, or let's say fields needed. And this is going to be a call that gets shut off immediately, essentially calling the backend saying, okay, like what has happened for the Stripe account? Well, that's right now all that's going to happen is it's going to return false, saying that the setup hasn't begun. I'm doing a little switching here. So I'm back on the backend. I'm just going to add an else statement for now, saying, okay, yes, the setup has begun. I don't know, Stripe account. And so we're on the front end. I'm setting my state in this home to be setup has begun false. Is loading fields is true, so it begins by loading immediately. And here is this is a post request here. So we're gonna delete this component did mount. Yes, we're gonna delete it. And we'll change this to be component. We're gonna call this fetch fields needed. And there's not going to be any input, and we can delete this because we don't need that. And we're going to bind this function to our actual thing. We're also going to have an error, which is going to be null. And the response is going to we're going to get a JSON response from the backend, which we do. And that's not the right input. Copy this from our payment.js. We're going to make this post where it's going to post, with nothing. We don't actually need to post with anything. And we're going to get a response with the JSON object here. And with that JSON, we're going to do what we know is going to be set success, a message. And the last thing that's going to be being returned is setup began. That's all going to be in this JSON. This is just a deconstructing, so this is the same as if I went to go like this. Success, and then I guess I spelled it wrong there, but same thing. It knows that since this is the same name as that, it knows how to figure it out. And so with that, we have our response, and so we have to handle two cases. So we say, okay, if it's a success, the call, all you have to do is mark setup as setup began and mark. That's it actually. And the last, all we have to do is change this to be not loading anymore. Otherwise, if it's a fail, that's done. Setup, it's done, and then this would be, we'll put our error in, our message into the error because it'll say like failed to grab, make a Stripe call or something like that. We don't actually have that. We can remove these functions here, and then now we're down on the render. And so what we're going to do is just load and we have to grab our state elements, this dot state, and then first thing we need is loading, because if this is true, we're making a server call and we don't actually want to show anything, so we're just going to show a paragraph text saying loading, and then that's all we're going to return. And then if we have if setup has not began, so if we're new to setup, we're going to put a button there. The one thing we do need is a div. I know I'm kind of typing a little fast right now, but a div. Begin setup. There's going to be no click action on it, and we'll need to have an error here. So these are that allow us to put functions inside. I need to grab setup began from the state, and I also need to grab error. So if there's an error, this is an inline message. I want to print out that error. Otherwise, don't render anything for the error. The same can be done with here. It's pretty simple. I mean, you can put that into a function because it is repeated code, but for now that works. The last thing we're going to do though is I'm going to say by clicking setup, you agree to the terms of service for Stripe. There's a link that you actually have to put in, but I guess and us. And this is just important to follow the Stripe guidelines. That's why I say we have to do it. And if I hit save there, take a look. My server is no longer running on my terminal. I'm going to hit npm run start dev. I just did an up and then an enter key there. It's sitting on port 2018. And then what I'm going to do is this will actually refresh the page. It's compiled successfully. If I hit refresh, it's going to say loading. And based on the fact that it's not changing, I don't think loading ever goes away. Okay, there's a bug in our thing. So I'm now looking at my atom again. So is loading fields needed? It says loading. False, false. That's the issue. So I actually never call the fetch fields needed, and we actually want to just do that after the components. We don't want to do that in the constructor. We want to do that in the component we'll mount. And we're just going to say this dot fetch fields needed, and nothing's changed. So on the backend, it only stops the hot reload if you change the backend. So nothing's changed on the backend. So as my terminal says, it's ready. If I just open up the Chrome, it did the refresh automatically, and I can tell that nothing's been set up. Yeah, I can look at my network tab here, and I have this get, and as you can see, this is the response I got: the success, and then missing Stripe account, and then begin setup. And so that's the first UI setup on the React side. Now it's a matter of we're gonna actually add the onClick. I'm sorry, I forgot to add the onClick. So the onClick it's pretty simple. It's just adding a function and binding it to the actual component. On click begin setup, let's say, is going to be my function name. I don't know if you want to say on click in it, but okay. So the on click is there. I have to create a function with this. Scroll the bottom here. I'm going to put a little console log in there just so that we know that the click is happening. And then we're going to go down our button and say on click this dot on click, and that's everything you need to do. So if nothing's changed in the backend, I don't have to worry about recompiling on the terminal side. Refresh the page. I'm going to right click and go to inspect to show my developer tools. I'm going to hit the JavaScript console and hit begin, and then you can see it in the JavaScript console. So begin setup happens, and so the whole front end is pretty much set up minus the fetch to say like, okay, like I've clicked begin setup, and I'll show you that in the second part of this, the begin setup. Okay, so in the begin setup, actual server side, as you can see, we have the whole front end set up. So this is just I have a way to do the on click, and then when I do the on click, I'm going to call an endpoint. Now this is a special case. This is my home.js. I'm just going to close that. I'm also going to close this for now. And I have my get account, so it returns the fields needed. It doesn't actually yet, but it will. I'm just going to copy that entire thing and paste it again. I'm just going to show begin Stripe connect setup, and I'm going to change this to say setup so that it's a different actual endpoint. And so here I'm going to assume that there's no Stripe account ID. We know that. So we can actually delete all this. One thing we have to do is we actually have to install the Stripe Node SDK. So we hit Chrome. I realized I didn't include it in my tabs up top. If you go to github.com/stripe, it'd be somewhere in here. I'm going to type in Node here. Okay, so this is the Node library, and you can add it to your project by just doing npm install stripe -- save. Okay, so it's successfully installed. What we're going to do here is I'm on the Stripe Node library, but what I'm going to do is actually look at the Stripe full API, so this tab here. The step we're doing is, if you scroll down to connect on the left side, you want to hit create an account. What we'll first have to do is import the Stripe library with our API key. Scrolling up to the top of our payment page. Everything's happening in this payment page, by the way. Like, so we're going to use a constant, and then we're saying, okay, require Stripe, and then the next step is to include the secret key. And so we have ours, and if you remember from before in the installation part of this video, it's under the config and then under config.js. Here it is. And as you can see, I actually have config here, and I can reference it. The one issue though I have with this is if you use an ESLint, it doesn't like the absolute being below the relative path. We can get away with it because we have our config.stripe secret. We don't have ESLint installed, and that's fine because this is not super bad. It's better to have the stripe key in one spot and ignore it than to have these two swapped around. So this is fine. And so I'm actually just going to close the get for right now. And here's the request to create an account. So we'll need to actually get the type from the user. And I'm just going to copy that, and then I'm going to go back to my Atom, fix the indentation. Okay, and so this shows that I need a couple things for my user. First, I know I'm hard coding user information. So we'll continue to do that with just the email here. We'll pretend that I retrieved that from a database because I'm not going to show you how to do that. So email here, I can just, I'm just going to shorthand it, so this is the same as doing this. But since it's one name, I can just do this. I'm assume that I'm going to get the country and the type by passed via. Sorry, the type is I want custom, not standard. Standard would be if you want to do the OAuth with Stripe, which is another option. This is for custom. So the type is custom, and then the country is, you can give them a range of countries, but I'm going to pass it from the front end. So country code, and then the request and the body will contain the country code. Actually, I'm going to just do this. Country, just so I can do, again, shorthand. And you can add an additional check in here. Let's say I'm only going to allow, like, okay, there's better ways to do this, but let's say I'm only going to, for my application, I'm only going to allow Canada or the US. Well, Canada is CA, and do this. Canada is CA, and so I'm going to do the not. So if it's Canada, what am I doing? Sorry, I just really messed this up. So if it's Canada, so if it's not Canada, and country is not the US, then just return invalid, an error saying, no, we don't support that. And then otherwise, it's a valid country, and indent all of this, and we're gonna make it's gonna make the server call. If the server comes back with an error, I actually want to print this out. I don't know what a server error looks like. I have an idea what it looks like. It's a pretty standard thing, but I have to actually see it. So I'm going to print it out so that I can see the console log and I can program the actual error message in there. So error. This I'm going to leave that blank for now, just because I know I can get. I'm pretty sure I can get the body from the error message and put it into the response. And then otherwise, otherwise I need to actually get the account ID. So this would be console log.account. And what I'll do is I'll actually create two of them. So I'm going to say, instead of this email, I'm going to say one at keythrough.ca. And this will actually never return anything, but that's fine. We're not trying to return anything. So we have a couple options to trigger this. I can use the front end, or I can use a REST client. I'm going to show you how to do it with a REST client, so if you want to just build out the backend, you can just do that. So I opened up, you can use Postman, or you can use this advanced REST client. I don't think that's valid anymore. And here is my URL. This is sitting on port 2118. It is a post request. The top is content type is application JSON. The content is our country code is one parameter that we pass in. I'll just make this TE. We make it that just so that we trigger that first error statement. And so we're gonna. I just switched over to my terminal here. I do the npm run start dev to start my terminal. I keep switching windows, so I apologize right this second. Okay, I'm looking at the Atom text editor, so we're first going to try to trigger this one. If I go back to my REST client, actually I really want to go back to my terminal, see if it's running, but I assume it's running. I'm just going to hit send, and I got 200, which is a valid statement, and then we got the response of success false, invalid country, which is our error statement here. So now I'm going to change this to be US. The one thing I realized I didn't do was I didn't put in, this is all valid information, I just want to see the error statement. So what I'm going to do is change this to put a 2 in there just so it's an invalid type, and it's going to throw this error, and I just want to see what the error statement looks like so we understand it. So I'm going to do npm run start for my terminal, and we're going to wait for that to get going. Okay, and so we have a valid country now, and if I redo this call and I hit send, hopefully it throws. Okay, so it did throw the error, and as you can see I printed out the error here. It's a giant mess, and okay, so here's this is the error statement I really want. You know, invalid type must be one of the following, but I know I can see it here. Here's the actual message, and that's kind of perfect. So if I jump back over to my actual code on my editor here, I can just say, maybe you might not have ever seen this, but if you do this notation, it's the same as doing the concat with the plus. What I mean by that is I can do this. It would be the same as that. But this is the better format for it, in my opinion. So here, error, and then I'm going to include the error message. And so we'll actually we have to run the server again. npm run, start dev. And as soon as that gets going, we'll switch over to a REST client and try that call again. And I just want to see if it's a valid error statement, because we're going to go using that going forward for all. So we're not going to actually have to think of deal with errors. We're going to present the Stripe errors to the user, and then you can make them better from there. Okay, so it now says error invalid type must be one of the standard, express, or custom. A standard, express, or custom. And so we're going to switch that back to be custom. So our backend server didn't crash here, which is good. And we're going to switch to our text editor if I can find it. So I don't actually need to see this error anymore. We're going to fix this as say custom. And we know the response, if my page worked, is going to be this account. And we want the account ID. And so that's what's important to us. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually get that account ID. The reason why we're going to get it is because you would save this to a database in association with this user. You'd say, okay, so this user's account ID is this, and then we can use this account ID to reference everything on Stripe. So if I go if I go ID with my shorthand here, and then I say account, I get the account ID. What I said on my UI is by actually clicking begin setup, you also agree to the terms and services. I was just scrolling through the full API docs, and I realized that one of the elements was terms and services. I know I said that we're gonna actually agree to it. Back to this doc, I had it open when one of these tabs. This is under docs, connect, custom accounts. These are the required things. It says update your terms and services. I open that in a new tab. And this is a demo. Register your account. By registering your account to our, you agree to our terms and service agreement and the Stripe Connect account service agreements. You have to put that in. And what I want to actually show you is this. This is what the code that we need to run is. This is, you pass the Stripe accountant, and then this terms of services. So it's stripe.accounts.update. And so with that, open up your Atom. Stripe.accounts.update. I've already forgotten. And then it's just the account ID and then Where's my atom? And so it's just the account ID. Make that a new line. It's the account ID, and then you put this object in. I literally copied and pasted that object, and this just gets the IP and the date, and this will allow them to accept. And with that, we just have to throw this then in here, and this will be the callback. Then I guess res.send success is equal to true. Account setup has begun. Again, begun, whatever. And what I'm going to actually return is the Stripe account ID. You don't actually need to. We're going to hard code it in, but this you would have to. At this point, you would update it in the user database that you're maintaining. And so this is all the entire backend. I'm actually going to switch back to the front end for a second just to make this call. So if I go to my home.js, I know this is now mixing backend stuff. Add this.fetch or on start account setup. This.on bind this, and then scroll down. All we're doing here is essentially copying this this fetch call, pasting it in. We're going to look up this endpoint, which is account/setup. Account/setup. We're going to pass in as a parameter the country code. Let's just hard code that for now. Yeah, let's hard code that for now. You just put it like an option. Like I recommend just putting a select box in there, like so you only give them so many options, like the specific countries, and then you show them the country in English, and then you hand it to them and hand the backend it in the country code. I mean, I'm not gonna go much more into detail about that. And this is gonna be. And this is going to be okay. So this is going to be loading, and then on result, it's going to change the state. It's not going to change the state actually. It's going to leave the state. Sorry, I want to change this to be true. So I want to say if it's now going to be loading. And I want to say, okay, if it's successful, if there's an error, I want to stop saying that it's loading and show the error. And then the other thing I want to do is say, okay, if it's successful, now call fetch fields needed, because then we'll get the list of fields that are required. And the last step I have to do is actually add this. Okay, I've already added this, so I just have to add this, the on click. And we're good to get try this out. So we'll have to jump over to our terminal, start the dev server. The one issue is with mine, that's also a bug. The one issue with mine is I'm not saving to a user database. So when I call this.fetch, fetch fields needed, I'll just get an error saying that like you don't have a Stripe account ID because I'm hard coding mine. Yours shouldn't happen that way. And on line 63, I got an error. 63. Remove the extra comma. Let's try it again. npm run start dev. Backend is compiled. Let's see how the front end does. Compiled successfully. Okay. So this is my front end code. And now if I click this, it will respond. It will invalid country. You know what it is? That error is because I have probably country here and then country code on the front end. If you caught that error, good job. I did not. Scrolling up here. No, that's country. This is country code. Whatever. It's a naming thing. And it recompiled. And try it again. Begin setup. It'll say loading. looks like it just crashed. Okay, request is not defined. My IP address was blank. It failed. I just read that the IP address is sitting in the request, so it was just a naming thing. This request object, and so I just have to set request.ip, and it will give me the IP address. So I'm just going to restart the server and try that all again. Now backend's compiled. Okay, let's try that one last time. Hopefully it doesn't fail this time. I'm gonna hit refresh, and it's gonna show my begin setup. I hit begin setup, and it went through. I have no idea if it returned. The fact that I don't see network set up, and then okay, so it returned my account ID. It's just since my get doesn't actually, it says I haven't set up since I don't have an account ID. It failed. But that's whatever. Now that I have one, I just copied it from the response here. I go to my Atom, I scroll up. I can minimize this post now. I can show this one, and I can just change this to be Stripe account ID. So now if I refresh the page, it crashes. I have to start the server again. Gonna load, and as soon as it actually loads properly, it's gonna. Okay, now it's Stripe adding Stripe elements. Okay, so that's this first part of this video in terms of now we have our account ID, and now it's all about the elements and adding the elements and handling the special cases. So I'm gonna show you how to do that now. Okay, so in this part I'm gonna show you how to get the fields needed. Is this step actually? So if I go to This is going to happen on the back end. Then we're going to actually handle it on the front end. It'll be two different steps. So the first one is just click and open. I have a lot of tabs open. I apologize for that. You want to go to the full Stripe API docs, and you want to scroll. Just hit the retrieve account, and as you can see, I can go Stripe accounts.retrieve, and then I pass in this account ID. And it returns an account object, otherwise an error. This is what makes it awesome in terms of. I'm just going to copy this line, this one line. I'm going to open up payment.js. So if there's no Stripe account ID, return that. That's valid. But otherwise, we have our Stripe account ID, and we put it right there, and then we function. I'm gonna do a different notation, and it's gonna be a Stripe account, and that's right. So I have to check my work, and so it is gonna return error, and so essentially, if there's an error, we're gonna return the error because we don't need to tell them what's wrong. So we do need to tell them what's wrong, but we'll let them handle it. So we're gonna deal with the error the same way we dealt with it here. This message.error, scrolling up, so this will be false if it failed, and this is message.error, but we can say setup has began, and began, whatever. But there's no error. We have our account back, and here is the account. And that's everything you need to do on the back end. Hopefully we'll test that out. You know what, I can test it out with my REST client. Again, if you're not following with the front end part as well, I'll show you with the REST client. So I have to start the server. npm run start. I'm going to switch back to my REST client. Sorry, I have to actually see when it's done. The next is the Webpack is going to compile. So I can actually call my REST client now. So if I just say send, and it passes back this account object, exactly what I needed. And if you scroll through it, eventually you'll see fields needed. This alphabet. Personal address, this is all missing. We'll have to update this. I'm unverified because I hadn't given my document that I needed, the file upload. But I have in fact accepted the terms of services, which is perfect. And if you look at verification here and then fields needed, there's a list of elements I need to do. So legal entities for date of birth, first name, last name, the type of account. And so what with that, we're gonna do that via we're gonna first set this up on the front end, and then we'll jump back in the next step to handle a key value setup. We have our fields needed and our entire account object. We have to set up on the front end. If I go to home.js, my fetch fields needed. It's really a fetch account. So I'm going to actually do some renaming quickly here, just because to make some things make more sense. So this is going to be a fetch account, not fetch fields needed. Change it here. I'll just do a. And it's going to become fetch account. And is loading. This fetch is loading fields needed. It will become just is loading. Okay, and so when we get our fields needed back, our account back, account will be an aspect to it, but it's undefined. Sorry, I'm just switching back to payments quickly. You have to set this to null in the error. Okay, otherwise it will have an account object, and with that, we're going to put that into the state. Just going to scroll up to the state, and then start the starting value of it will just be null. Okay, and so with that, I'm just going to scroll down a little further. I'm moving a little quick right now. I'm just going to print out the account. So what I did was I renamed it to be fetch account. I changed it so the account object is always coming back. If it's an error, it just returns null. And then I renamed it to be is loading, and I just changed this to put on the response, grab it, put it into the state, and I set it state default, and then I just put it into the console log for now, just so we can see it on the front end. So I'm switching my terminal. I'm gonna do an npm run start dev. That's the backend compiled. I'm gonna switch to my tab. I'm gonna reload the front end. Bind of undefined is an error. Account is not defined. That would be an error. So if I switch back to Atom, I know exactly. So account actually never gets imported here. I guess you could say imported. And then this will actually reload. Can I just make a quick point? Here's my account. Quick point is you don't actually need to set up began. If the account returns null, then you can assume that there's no account. The setup hasn't begun, but it doesn't hurt to be 2 steps. And if you go to verification and fields needed, we can grab the fields that are missing. So here, account, verification, and inside of that is fields needed. And those are all the fields that we don't actually have. It's going to redo this on me. It didn't throw any errors, so I know those work. And essentially what I want to do is I'm going to make it so that there's no formatting. Now types will be limited, except I'm not going to handle each individual type. So this next step is we're going to start adding elements. So first if statement we have to do is if the fields needed is, let's say 0. If that's true, then we're all set up. Otherwise, all we have to do is loop through the fields needed. So map, and then we'll just call it field object, and this is where we start putting the if statements in. So right now we're just gonna say a div, and we're gonna put a label on there, and it's going to be the text, field key, I guess you'd call it. And then that would be, it's going to just list out all the fields required. I'm just trying to think about this in my head, how to do this in the most dynamic way. So as you can see, bank account would be a special case. We'd have to render a specific element. So what we really want to do is pass legal entity and legal entity.dateofbirth.day into the backend, so that we can let the backend handle, just say like update this element with this value. And so with that, when you do an on change, when you do the on change for the text, I'm just thinking in terms of React. When you do the on change, we should do the on change on a object that's sitting in state. The value will become key will be the legal entity.dateofbirth.day will be the key, and then the value will be the value. And then when you hit submit, it would save. Yeah, I don't want to do as you type. That's just a mess, because then as soon as you type far enough, it will just submit, and you'll never see it again because it won't be a field needed anymore. So we'll do a save button. When you hit save, it submits that object that's in state to the backend, which has the key, which is the needed thing, and the value, which is the text box enter. So with all of that, we're going to create a new component here. We're going to say this is just my input key value, and it's going to be a React component. Might as well use React, I mean, that's what it's being built in. And it's going to be called input key value. And props, this is a stateless function. Yeah, a pureless function, whatever. And this will have a div, just like the other one does, and then a paragraph tag or a label. Let's just use, let's use a label. I think it's HTML4 they like. Props.id, let's call it. Yeah, we're gonna call it ID because I don't think key is. I think key is a taken word. And we'll do this one with props.text. It will actually be the same thing as ID, whatever. And then an input type. And then an input box. And in this input box, it'll be type text. I don't think there's any passwords. There's no passwords. Type text. There'll be the ID on it will be props.id. The on change will have to be written as a function. The value will be props.value, because we can pass that in. Then we got to export default input key value. And I mean, we're going to do this for all of them. I know technically, we're going to do this for all of them right now. Technically, bank account has its unique case, but that's where we're going to add this if statement in and return a different component. And so we need an ID and a value and a text. So text is going to be the field key. The ID will be the field key. I know it's the same thing, but I assume that you're going to change the label for the field key. You can create a little function that says if I pass in this key, I get this text. And then the value will be, we'll get that from the object. We'll see a value here, and then value is going to be set to null for now. And then the on change is not loaded. So if this will refresh, input the key value is not defined. Yes, I have to import it. Scrolling to the very top, making some space, do an import, and since it's in the same path, it's going to just be /. And now if I refresh this, I completely forgot the word from. And if I jump back over here, so now we have a legal entity and the date of birth. So here I put my birth in, which is the 29th. Right now if I do type anything, I'm typing things I'm trying to, it won't enter because React, when you do a React form, you have to have an on change function which updates the state, which holds the value. If you don't understand React, I'll show you how to do it. And so that's what we're going to do here. Fields needed form, we'll call it, and it will be empty to start off with. And so here, our fields needed form is call this actually, we're going to change this to be get field value. It's going to be this, and all you're going to pass in is the field key. And what this function is going to do is it's going to go find the value. And the reason why I'm just going to write it as a function, just for clarity, so I'm going to have to add it and bind it to here. And it's going to get a key. And it's going to use this, and that's why I had to bind it, is because it's going to use the fields needed form. And it's essentially going to say if fields needed form has this key, it's going to return that. Otherwise, it's going to return nothing. And so that's how it's going to work. So the default is that they're all going to be blank. I realize I have a value attribute here. I don't actually need it. I can just do this. And so that should technically work. It works. It's having an issue. It wants me to add a key attribute to somehow make it unique. Go back to Adam. I'm just going to quickly do that. Say key, and then I'm just going to the cheating way of doing this is just do map.random, and it'll get rid of that error. Okay, so now I have that set up. I have to actually do the on change now. So I gotta write an on change. I'm gonna call it on on text box change. Fields needed is gonna be my function name. And it's gonna be this dot. And then I'm gonna scroll up. I have to bind it. And the attributes I'm gonna pass in there for this is React. Not having ESLint is kind of helpful for these demos. So it's going to receive the event from the onChange, and then it's also going to receive the key, which is our label key, similar to this. And we're going to actually, I'm just going to copy that from there. We're going to need the fields form, so it's going to add it to the fields form. And it's going to do the exact same check of if it's in the fields needed form. So what I'm going to do is this. Fields needed at the key, and then e.target. If you have never done React form, it uses e.target.value is where you find the value of the onChange. Where I'm going to add it in there. I mean, it really doesn't need an if, but yeah, this doesn't need an if for any reason, because like it's going to add if it's blank, it's going to leave it blank. It's going to put an empty string in there. And the last step is you just have to update the state because it's living in this variable here that I created. And so this, and I can just write that in shorthand because I'm not changing the names of anything. And hopefully this works because I found this quite a clean solution. And I'm just going to refresh the page. And now if I type things, didn't actually set the onChange. Adam. I scroll down and I have it coming in as an on text box change, and with that the on change has an event, and then I'm just going to call the event and I'm going to pass in the props.id. I think I called it, yeah. And this is actually props.onChange text box. It's losing focus every time I type. I'm going to leave that for now because that bug is not my main purpose of this video. I'm going to jump back over here just for React consistency reasons. You should really be using prop types to control what elements you're bringing in. So with that, this was called input. So So what I'm saying is you import prop types. It's part of React, and then ID. I always know it's going to be a string, and it's required. It's 100% required. I'm just going to actually copy, and then text, which is the text for it. It's going to be required as well. ID is already declared. Value is also 100% required as a string. We return an empty string, which is fine. And so they're all required, and so that's a properly written React component. The last step we need is the actual save, which would be outside of this, because we only need one save button. So I actually just I'm going to copy this into a div, and put this into a div, and I'm going to put a button in here and see if it prints. You could always add the choice to load in all their values, all the previous values, right? So you type in, because we have the account object and they all exist there, that's an option. And you also have the key value information. That's more on your side with React and working with that. So that's everything. I mean, we have to do the on handle. Let's do the on click, and then we'll switch back over to the back end. So this will be called on click saves fields needed, or I'm just gonna call it on. I don't know. This dot. I'm just trying to fix my spacing here. And now I actually have to create this function, so scroll to the top. Now you almost have to ask yourself, is it better to compartmentalize it and you put these all into components? So like, if it's all set up, you load this component. If it's all you fields need, you load this component. I mean, we only put the key and the value into its own component. And what I mean by that is, like, should this first setup again be a component, and you just load the component here. It's your call on how much you break things apart. Just gonna copy that, and I'm gonna call this. And I'm actually going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to put the server call in the onClick, and so it's going to set it to true, is loading to true, and I'm going to call this API stripe/account save. I'm going to pass. What I'm really using is the. Let's close some of these. I know it's getting the file is getting a little big. What I really use is fields form, and I use the key and stuff. And so I'm actually probably just going to pass that in. So with that, fields form and this dot state, to grab it, and I'm just going to close this and just pass it in there. It works from a logical, and then if it's successful, it's going to call this dot fetch account, which will re-grab the account, look up the fields needed, and hopefully, after hitting save, some of the fields needed go away. And so that's it for the front end right now. All right, so now with the back end, we have this API stripe account/save where we're passing in the fields needed. This is just an object with a key, which would be like legal entity dot DOB, which is date of birth, and then .day. That's a string as the key, and then whatever the value is as the value. And so we're passing that in, as you can see, it's coming in here, into this new endpoint I've created, or made up. And so I'm just going to copy this entire post, and paste it. I'm going to scroll up. Save. It's called save, account save. And with that, we have each one of our fields existing in body. So what we really need to do is we're going to go through and update them all. So each one of our fields exists in body, and what you're really going to do here is you're going to go through and loop through the object key and value, and essentially assign the key to the value and update the stripe element. Does that make perfect sense? And with that, I mean, there's lack of formatting here, just because what you're doing is you're passing the account ID and then you're passing in the object, right? So you're passing in like what you're gonna update. So you can't do a request.body, right? Let me just show you. So what I'm saying is, the way it works is it's like accounts.update, and the first parameter is the account ID, all right? The second parameter, let's say this is gonna be your phone number, hypothetically. This is what they want, and actually our request.body, we're passing in this exact thing, but instead we're doing, it'd be this. I guess is dot date of birth dot day, and this won't work, I don't think, but we have that Stripe Stack Overflow that I mentioned at the start of this video right here. It's in the description. That essentially changes, so that this becomes an object, right? Yes, it does. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out if it. We really got to run this. Let's try this. Okay, so it creates a nested object, but what if I have two? I can't change this, eh? What's full page do? Nothing. I just want to run this code to see if it. What I really want to know is if I have value 1 and value 2 and they're both in the same nested object, do they both make it, or does one get wiped out? And that's my real. Ooh, that's not what I want. Well, we can actually find out. I'm going to paste this right into the endpoint and then just call it from the. This is my function, and my editor is right here. Put that at the top. So let's try it. So I'm saying hypothetically, we have day of birth, let's say, and that's 29, and we have day of month of birth, and that's 11, and they both belong to the same nested element. So in this case, it would be nested elements would be names here. So this would be, let's say, hypothetically legal entity, and this one would be dot day of birth, and then this would be day, and you put 29 in there, and it would return an object. I realize this might not work. But what if I update one at a time? Like just if I do the first one, day of birth, and then I do the next one, like, and make them separate stripe calls. Okay, that actually might work better. We'll try it with that. Okay, we need to start off with by having a Stripe account ID. This would be retrieving it from your server, your backend. Okay, so we have a Stripe account ID. Next, we need to loop through the list of object elements. There's a Lodash actually, which we'll use. So Lodash is a library that's very popular in JavaScript. So all you gotta do is go to your terminal, do an npm install Lodash -- save. That's probably the best way to do this. You just go to documentation. You don't want array, you want collection. And you want this for each, and the collection would be as you can see, it's like it can loop through. So for each, and then this would be the request.body. So this, if it comes in, if you save no elements, it shouldn't do anything, which is fine. And then it's going to have the value and the key, and then it's the error notation. And then for each one, you want to do stripe.accounts.update, and you want to update the Stripe account ID, and that's when this bad boy kicks in. And technically, in this case, based on what the key that we have in the request body, so this key and the value, and yeah, we're gonna make this into an object just so we can see it. And async, based on an async issues, this might have actually issues because you're not gonna get them all at, like, all you're gonna, what I would say, create an update. Okay, you may have an issue with this because async wise, the call won't respond before you do the next iteration of the loop. You know what, this is kind of hacky, but I recommend using like the async library or something like that, but this will be my hacky solution. Here, I'm just going to say at the then that add one, and then and then if I is equal to the length of the number of keys. This is what I want. It's amazing how much, even during a video, I use the internet. So this would be my request.body.length -1. And if this reaches the end, it's going to return this .zen, and then success. True message.saved. No idea if this is going to work. We're actually just going to give it a try. Also do this. Make sure we eventually hit an end. Just make sure I didn't screw up something. This will print out the object. These are all pretty confusing, but that's all good. We'll hit not npm dot. So Lodash won't work here because we haven't actually imported it. My camera's about to die. I only have the one battery, so require, and it's not that, it's Lodash. And again, this is supposed to go above. I mean, other than the Stripe one, we're gonna do it properly. Okay, so that should work, hopefully. npm run start dev, and so we'll take a look at the server call. We'll change to just to see how it goes. Jump back to my element here. It's not good when I have on click file saved. It's unknown. Okay, so we have this date of birth. Okay, so it's going to do this unfocused thing. I have to figure out a solution to that. And then let's try this. That's really annoying, that focus thing. Okay, so the on click, save, network. This is pending. Okay. Okay, so the issue here, I'm just looking at it. So the issue is when I went to go save date of birth, I saved day, and then it says, oh, you're missing month and year. And then when I went to go save month, it did the same thing for day. So I have to catch these errors. Because I essentially need to submit all of them at the same time. And I will do that with, okay, so it's just a promise, right? So try catch wasn't the right move. Come on, Keith. do that. I don't know what I just did. So this is my results, and then this would be my error here. So if it's an error, this side gets called, and that's when I'm just going to return a false. False. Error. Run 15 seconds in the camera before it stops the recording automatically. Okay, so I'm gonna try this. 2, I've just refreshed the page. 1, hit save. Perfect, it caught the error by the looks of it. Can't set headers after they've been sent. That means that was because I did the res.send twice because there's 2 errors being thrown. I just add a break. Maybe just add a return. I don't know what the standard is here. Give it a Google. I don't know, just off the top of my head. I know I've been Googling everything else. I'm just trying to get this working because this is why I handled a lot of the cases where it's just a key and a value. It may be a nested object, but it's still just a key and a value. So, and with that, I mean, the date and the month one actually may never be successful, because if it okay, so it's never going to be successful. I'm gonna think about that a little bit. It's gonna work. So this solution so far does work. I'm not going to delete it. I'm not wasting your time. This solution so far works for like cases where, like, first name could go in by itself, last name can go in by itself. Other entities like that can go in by themselves. There's just some special cases like date of birth that are multiple. And what I have to do is I think I'm gonna write a function. My battery has to charge. I have to write a function also that goes back a layer and grabs and groups those objects. So like the date of birth, they all get submitted together. I have to write a function. I need just some time to think about it without the camera rolling. So I'll come back to this. My battery's still not charged, but I did find a solution. I originally tried object.assign, which is merges two array objects together. The idea being, instead of submitting multiple times with Stripe with multiple objects, therefore one overriding the other, or not having the right number of elements for the day of birth, so like submitting just the day and then just the month, and it would always reject it because I would need all of them. I decided that it'd actually be better if I just merged them all into one and made only one Stripe call. That obviously is a pretty obvious solution. But the issue is I want to use object.assign, which is a shallow merge of two objects, and that didn't work. So then I went online and I found this. It's assign.-deep, not deep-assign. The first one, deep-assign, is a deprecated library. Don't use that one. And so instead, this merges all three of them. And so I just went into here. I still have last name, right? So if I do, let's say my one, and then my year is, I actually need to put a proper year in here. And my last name is, let's put my real last name in, or a shortened version. I hit save. Yeah, as you can see, it removed, it was able to save all of them together. I'm just going to switch to my Stripe dashboard here. This is the user I'm using, so I'm under Connect. And I can go to Accounts, and there should be a key weave, which is the first one. And my birthday is the 2nd of 1994, first month, second day of 1994. So this worked properly. And the actual code for this is on my screen right now. If you look here, as you can see, what I'm doing is I create this Stripe object. I loop through the body elements in the request body. I generate a new object based on the dot notation that I showed you. So it takes the dot notation in a string and turns into an array. And then essentially what it does is does a deep merge on everything, so all the way down to the root. And then if it's on the very last element, it then updates the stripe.accounts. and hopefully that saves. And so here's my actual printout. So it has day of birth is one of the objects that it creates, and then it creates the month and the year and the last name, and then it saves right here with all of them merged together. This is making the assumption that you have the day of birth, the month, and the year all going in at the same time. You kind of have to make the decision on this one yourself, just because there's two cases. Essentially, either someone's missing an element, right? So if they insert it without the day of birth, the day, let's say, last name also gets rejected because they're not making separate calls, right? So you could maybe get away with figuring out a way to do, like, if it's not legal entity, not the next element, but if it's a third element, then it just does it with the deep merge. Otherwise, it does it on its own. That's one idea. I don't actually have the perfect solution. I don't know what the best use case is. Personally, I think a user is smart enough to enter in all their information. So if you're asking them for day of birth, like, they're gonna, and if you present it on the UI as, like, here's all three, like, they're gonna fill in all three of them at the same time. You won't have any issues that way, but that is your call on how to actually handle it. This is the most dynamic. I think that it's the most dynamic in most cases, right? Because it just takes any body with the key and the value as Stripe gives it to you from the retrieve. It creates an object, it merges all the objects together, it saves it, you're done. So now we're in part 2. We're gonna take a look at the actual special cases. The focus error is still there. I gotta figure out how to do that. I don't know if I'm gonna solve it in this, but essentially then there's things like entity type, which is not actually a special case, but there's only limited options. That's up to you to just write a function saying that if it's this one, load a select box with these options, and that would be creating a brand new React component. I might do that myself, but I really gotta let this camera charge, so I'll see you in part 2.